Okay, in this lesson, we are going to start thinking more deeply about the differences in development between different countries on the planet, and maybe even start to think about why there are these differences. So, what we're essentially asking ourselves is why do the entire populations of some nations live in absolute poverty, and others in other parts of the world live in what we might call levels of extreme wealth? And the first task we did last lesson was we looked to describe where, in general, are the what we might call rich countries, or what I would prefer to call developed countries of the world. And these are marked blue on this map, and we can see that they are primarily found in North America, in the western part of Europe, as well as Northern Europe, some parts of what we might call Southeast Asia, like Japan over here, and South Korea, and Australia, New Zealand. We then have what we might call developing nations, where they aren't quite there yet. That might be one way of describing it. And the majority of these are found in South America, large parts of Asia and Southeast Asia, as well as the northern and southern parts of Africa. And then within that developing section of countries, what we might call poorer countries, we have what we might call the poorest countries, the least developed. And these are almost entirely found in a region of the world that we know as sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, so that's the general pattern. The other key thing that we did was we looked at thinking about this girl, Niamiti, and you were asked to describe the differences in this girl's life compared to your own life. So, for example, here we see her with a large bucket walking down a dirt track to a hole in the ground, which is a mile away, and she's going to fetch water for the family. Now, when you think about what's the difference in development there, this girl's home doesn't have running water. And therefore, any drinking water or water she wishes to wash herself with has to be collected, and not from nearby, but requires considerable effort and labor and distance traveled to get there. In contrast, whenever you want to have a drink of water, you don't have to walk much more than 10, 15 meters to get to a tap. If you want to clean yourself, you have a room dedicated to doing that in your home, the bathroom. So that makes a very different life for you compared to her. And that's a really good way of illustrating and describing what differences in development really look like for human beings. Okay, let's start with what we're going to look at in today's lesson. So you'll want to open up assignment 1B, the development class task, if you haven't done so already. And we are going to be thinking about contrasting countries with our own. That's the main objective for today. And we're going to do it by using data. So we're going to gather some data from 3 different countries, and then you're going to be asked to compare how they're doing compared to ourselves. And you're even going to be asked to think about some reasons for why maybe these different countries are doing maybe not as well as we're doing. So if we have a little look at the key thing that you're going to complete in your first task. So task 1 is going to ask you to complete this table. Now, I've done one of the 4 things, which is access to clean water. So we saw in that video a second ago that Niamiti, living in Malawi, does not have access to clean water. And the question here would be, what percentage of people in Malawi don't have access to clean water? Well, Niamiti is clearly one. It's likely to be less than a quarter of the people of that country actually have running water where they live. Well, in the UK, everybody does. In contrast, in Brazil, 88% people do have access, which means 12% don't. In India, 70% have access to clean water, whereas 30% don't. And in Mali, which is an African nation, only 27% have access to clean water. Now, why are we interested in access to clean water? Well, if you don't have access to clean water, that can obviously affect your health, because it might mean that you're drinking contaminated water, which can result in disease, for example. So it's an important thing to consider when you think about how developed a country is. So I've given you the three bits of information for the 3 countries we're looking at for that. What you need to do is get the information for these 3 other things. So let's start with the first one, gross domestic product. So this is the average amount of wealth that a person has. So this is generated through the work that they do in a year. And we're going to calculate it using the international standard of dollars. Now we can see in the UK, we have 44, we create, an average British person creates that amount of dollars in a year, $44,288. How does that contrast with Brazil, India, and Mali? So what you want to do is use this web link here and it will take you to Wikipedia, and it will show you the list of all the countries in the world. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop here before we find out the data, and I ask you to do that. I'd like you to consider league tables. So we're about to look at the World League Table for wealth, but I'm looking at the league table of football teams in England, okay? And why are league tables really useful? Well, because we can clearly see when we rank things who is the best. Now, this ranking is done according to the number of points from winning or drawing games that teams have accumulated. And that this team here at the top has got 53 points, which is 10 more points than this team here. So they are clearly top. We could, however, rank these teams according to the number of goals they've scored. Well, if that was the thing we did, they would still appear at the top because they are the team that has scored the most goals. We could decide we were going to do it against the number of goals that they had conceded, goals against, and once again, they would actually appear top again. So based on whether it's goals being scored or points or even wins that they've achieved, they get to be the top ranked. And in contrast, the bottom ranked team is down here at the bottom because they've got the least points. Okay. They also have conceded the most goals and scored the least as well. Now, what do league tables help us? They help us see who's doing the best. They don't tell us why they're doing the best. Now, that's a little bit more complex. So why is this team, Manchester City, the top of the table? What are the different factors that result? Well, clearly they are scoring the most goals, so they probably have the best strikers. They're conceding the least goals, so they probably have the best defense. But then we have to start thinking about what makes the best strikers and the best defenders. Is it the best organization? Do they have the best tactics? Do they have the best coach? Are they the healthiest team? Are they the fittest team? Do they have the best diet? So there's a lot of different factors that come into understanding why a football team appears at the top of a league table. And we'll come back to this idea at the end of the lesson. Let's have a look at the list of countries. So we are trying to find out the wealth of our country, okay? And how does it compare to other countries' wealth? So we have a table here of all of the countries in the world, and we're wanting to find Brazil, India, and Mali. So the first thing I would suggest you do, we can see that Liechtenstein is our Manchester City. And if we go to the bottom of this table, who is our Norwich, who is at the bottom of our league? It's Burundi. Okay? And over here, we can see the wealth of these countries in rank order. And we're going to use what we call the IMF data. That's the International Monetary Fund. So if I click on this little arrow, it will rank it according to alphabetical order. And then I can scroll down and find my first country, Brazil. And I can see it's got 15,643. Now I would pause the video and complete the table by entering the data here. Now we're going to go down to India. Okay. And here is India, 7,333. I'd pause the video, enter the data here. And finally, we want to go down to find Mali. And there's Mali. And there's the wealth an average person creates, 2,469. So I would pause the video and enter the data here. Okay, we can now see the difference in the wealth being created by an average person in 4 different countries. And we can see that's quite a big difference between the people of Mali and the people of the United Kingdom. We now want to see how long these people of these 4 different countries live. Well, we know in the UK that people live to be on average 81.2, according to one source. What we're going to do is we need to click on this web link to find out the life expectancy of the other countries. And what I would do is, just like I did last time, if you can see that Japan is the Manchester City of this league table, and we're going to use the all column. And if we click here, we will alphabetically sort it, and we can then scroll down and find Brazil. Now, I'm not going to do that for you. I would pause the video now, click on the web link for life expectancy, and find out how long people of Brazil, India, and Mali live. Okay, I'm now assuming that you've completed the life expectancy for United Kingdom, Brazil, India, and Mali. Let's have a look at the final one, which is the percentage of people actually can read and write. this tells us something about the quality of the education in a country. So if we click on this web link, we can find out once again the ranking of all the countries. So who's our Manchester City? Well, if we do it according to there we are. We can see that North Korea, surprisingly, is our has the highest level of youth literacy. We could go for adult literacy and we could go for elderly. Well, in this case, I would go for 15 plus adult literacy. And that's what you want to look at. And you want to scroll down and find your country. So alphabetize it and go down to find Brazil and your other countries and select the data for adult 15 plus. Okay, I'm now assuming you have a completed table with your data. The next task is to describe the differences. Now, describing is where you use a bit of data from a source you're given, in this case, the table you've completed. And the best way to always describe data is to compare it to something else. And I would generally suggest you always pick the highest and compare it with the lowest. So, for example, you could say the gross domestic product of the United Kingdom is the highest of the 4 countries with, and you then say 44,288. In contrast, the lowest is, and you would pick the country which has the lowest. And that then shows you the difference. What you can also do, if you're doing really high level description, if you feel ready for this, and this is what National 5 students have to do in geography, you could calculate what that difference is. Now, to do that, you just need to take the lowest, which in this case would be Mali's bit of data, away from the United Kingdom. So it's like doing a wee sum, and that will actually show you how big a difference it is. Okay. Another way of describing differences is to calculate how many times bigger. So if Mali was around about 2000, that would actually make it about the United Kingdom about 22 times higher. What that really means is that the average British person has 22 times more wealth than the average Malian person. Or another way of thinking about this is that 22 Malians create the same amount of wealth as one person in the UK. Right, what you now want to do is go ahead and describe the differences for life expectancy, for literacy rate, and for access to clean water. Once again, pick the highest, pick the lowest, and what I would occasionally do is also bring in one of the other 2 countries just to show how different they are when compared to the highest. Okay, so you should now have paused the video, written a really good answer, which is full of data and compares the highest and the lowest, but also brings in Brazil and India, because you'll have noticed that Mali appears as the lowest continually and the United Kingdom appears as the highest continually. So it'd be useful to have also compared the UK to Brazil and India in 1 or 2 of your descriptions. This final part, I'm not going to help you with this, but we will review this next lesson. I would like you to offer at least one reason for why you think people in Britain generate so much more wealth or gross domestic product than people in Mali. If you can think of more than one, then please write it. Give a reason. Can you tell me why people in the UK live to be 81.2 compared to the very low life expectancy that you found out about Mali? Try to give me at least one reason, but if you can think about more than one, then great. Do the same for literacy rate. Why are we so educated? Why does everyone read and write compared to Mali where very few can read and write? And finally, why do we all have access to clean water, whereas only 27% of people in Mali do? Can you give me at least one reason, but more is better? Okay, that concludes the lesson. Make sure you've completed the table and answered task 2A and 2B.